He was born into a world of poverty, rejection, and obscurity, but within a few decades, he would become one of the most feared and hated men in human history. Adolf Hitler, a name that echoes with horror, was once just a boy dreaming of greatness, but dreams can turn into nightmares, especially when fueled by vengeance, rage, and unchecked power. April 20th, 1889. A small town in Austria called Braunau am Inn welcomed a baby boy named Adolf Hitler. His father, Alois, was strict and often abusive. His mother, Clara, was loving, protective, and the only real warmth in his childhood. From a young age, Adolf displayed a passion for art, but life had already set him on a very different path. As a teenager, Hitler applied to the prestigious Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna. He was rejected not once, but twice. The pain of rejection burned deep. Vienna, a city filled with different ethnic groups and political ideas, began shaping young Hitler's thoughts. He grew resentful, bitter, and increasingly influenced by rising nationalist and anti-Semitic rhetoric. It was in the gutters of Vienna, penniless and alone, that his dangerous ideologies began to take root. Then came World War I. Hitler enlisted in the German army and served bravely on the front lines. He was wounded, decorated for his courage, and blinded temporarily in a gas attack. When the war ended in 1918, Germany had lost. The Treaty of Versailles humiliated the nation. It imposed crushing penalties, territorial losses, military restrictions, and enormous reparations. Hitler, like many Germans, saw it not as peace but betrayal. Germany's defeat became Hitler's obsession. He found his purpose: to restore Germany's pride and punish those he believed were responsible. The Jews, the communists, the elites, the scapegoats. He joined a small political group in Munich, the German Workers' Party. A few speeches later, he became its most charismatic speaker. He renamed it the National Socialist German Workers' Party, the Nazi Party. With fiery speeches and theatrical rallies, he promised to make Germany strong again. He gave the broken people a target for their anger and a dream of revival. In 1923, Hitler and his followers attempted to overthrow the Bavarian government in the infamous Beer Hall Putsch. It failed. Hitler was arrested and sentenced to prison. But it was in that prison cell that he wrote Mein Kampf, My Struggle, a manifesto of hate. It laid out his vision for Germany and the world: racial purity, totalitarian rule, and a future without Jews. And when Hitler was released, the country had changed. The Great Depression had shattered the global economy. Millions were jobless. Fear was everywhere. And in fear, people turned to strong voices, those who promised safety, strength, and salvation. Hitler's Nazi Party gained momentum. In 1933, Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany. Once in power, he moved swiftly. Civil liberties vanished. Political opponents were arrested. The Reichstag fire was blamed on communists and used to justify emergency powers. In 1934, President Hindenburg died, and Hitler declared himself leader of Germany. Democracy was dead. A dictatorship was born. The Hitler Youth indoctrinated children. Books were burned. Dissent was crushed. The Gestapo silenced opposition. And across Germany, Jews were stripped of rights, dignity, and hope. The Nuremberg laws of 1935 institutionalized racial discrimination. Jews could no longer marry non-Jews, attend certain schools, or hold many jobs. Their citizenship was revoked. But Hitler wanted more than domestic control. He wanted Lebensraum, living space. He began rebuilding the military in secret, defying the Treaty of Versailles. In 1938, he annexed Austria and Then, he claimed the Sudetenland from Czechoslovakia, promising it was his last demand. The world watched, worried, but hoped appeasement would work. It didn't. On September 1st, 1939, Hitler invaded Poland. Britain and France declared war. World War II had begun. Hitler's blitzkrieg or lightning war smashed through Europe. Poland fell, then Denmark, Norway, Belgium, the Netherlands, and France. Hitler stood triumphant in Paris. His forces seemed unstoppable. He bombed Britain, trying to force surrender. But Winston Churchill stood firm. "We shall never surrender," he said, and they didn't. Behind the front lines, a darker war raged. Hitler's hatred for Jews turned into systematic genocide. Ghettos, deportations, mass shootings, and then gas chambers. Auschwitz, Treblinka. 6 million Jews were murdered in the Holocaust. Alongside them, millions of Romani people, disabled individuals, political prisoners, and others deemed unworthy of life. But Hitler's ambitions overreached. In 1941, he invaded the Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa. It was a brutal, bloody campaign. The Russian winter, fierce resistance, and stretched supply lines began to turn the tide. In the east, the Nazis were bogged down. In the west, the Allies landed in Normandy on June 6, 1944. They pushed through France, advancing toward Germany. Italy had already fallen. The Reich was crumbling. By early 1945, Soviet forces were closing in on Berlin. Hitler, now a broken and paranoid man, hid in a fortified underground bunker. He rarely appeared in public. His once loyal commanders questioned his judgment. His empire was in ruins. On April 30th, 1945, with Soviet troops just blocks away, Adolf Hitler took his own life. He shot himself in the head while biting down on a cyanide capsule. His new wife, Eva Braun, joined him in death. Their bodies were burned, their dreams of a 1,000-year Reich reduced to ash. Germany surrendered days later. The war was over, but the scars remained. The world was left to reckon with what had happened. Over 70 million people had died in the conflict. Entire cities were destroyed, families erased, cultures scarred, and at the center of it all was one man, a failed artist who convinced a nation to follow him into madness. History remembers Hitler not as a hero, but as a cautionary tale, a reminder of what happens when hate is normalized, when truth is silenced, and when power is handed to those who seek only to destroy. He began as a nobody and died as a tyrant, responsible for one of the darkest chapters in human history. But the story doesn't end with his death. It continues as a warning to future generations. Never forget the past, never allow hate to rise unchecked, and never underestimate the power of words, ideology, and fear, because in the right or wrong hands they can destroy the world. Adolf Hitler may be gone, but the shadow he casts still lingers, and it is up to us to ensure it never returns.